Hi everybody, the guest for today's class is Ashutosh Garg. He has a very unique profile. His career path is very interesting. He has worked as a corporate executive in multiple companies around the world. Later, he became an entrepreneur and launched several companies. He is a pioneer in retail pharmacy business in India. The Guardian Pharmacy was launched by him. The Guardian Pharmacy chain in India was launched by him. He has written several books, and when he has time, he has a passion to teach. He does offer custom courses to students around the world, especially related to business. His current venture is called The Brand Called You. Please visit TBCY.in. He has a lot of interesting content there. And you have written several books, and you also teach in business schools around the world. And more importantly, you are a practitioner who later on became almost like a visiting professor to schools around the world. So, whenever you and I talk, we talk often, the conversation always steers into how do we improve the quality of education in business schools? Mm-hmm. And of late, I am seeing schools are focusing on pedagogy. They are researching pedagogy. They want to come up with new pedagogical methods. That's a good thing to know. But unfortunately, pedagogy addresses only what needs to be taught. It doesn't address the other factors of the trifecta that I call what, who, and how. Mm-hmm. Who needs to teach these students? What kind of qualification is required? What needs to be taught? And how it needs to be taught. Mm-hmm. So my view is, if we were to start addressing the who component first, unlike in natural sciences, where the laws are immutable, the business education mostly deals with whatever is probabilistic in nature. So given that, what is your view about why we need to bring in more practitioners and these theoreticians offering courses is not sufficient?
Ram, thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you. Thank you for the wonderful introduction and for your kind words. I've always valued every time I have a conversation with you. I've enjoyed the time we spent together on the board of the entrepreneurship group at IIM Rohtak. Coming specifically to what your question is, I'm an ancient MBA, 1979 batch of Jamnalal Bajaj, which in those days was one of the top 3 or 4 institutes in the country. And while I had gotten to the other IIMs as well, I chose to go to Bajaj for one simple reason. And I was 19 years old at that time when I went to do my MBA. Bajaj was the only institute then which had an amazing mix of professors who taught us all the basic requirements of theory. And there was an incredible range of top corporate leaders who would come and help our students to interpret everything that we had been taught. So I'll give you some examples. There are, and I'm sure today also, there are several courses on the theory of marketing, right? And we spoke about the 5 Ps, and now, of course, there are a lot of interpretations of the 5 Ps and many, many things of marketing, which we would get taught in our marketing class. And then we would have the then marketing director of GSK, Dr. Tarun, who would come and speak to us, and he would take us through an actual real life implementation and explanation of everything that we were learning. Now, for me as a 19, 20-year-old, my retention of the theory was much greater when I suddenly realized that this is how it was being put into practice. The same thing happened in a subject like accounting and finance. The same thing happened in a subject like economics. There was a subject called econometrics, which I couldn't ever figure out, and I still don't know how to figure it out. It was too complex for me and too difficult for me to understand. But as I sit back and think, the reason I was not able to understand econometrics was because I had a professor who was an absolute theoretician. And the first day he came, he started to write some kind of an equation, which started from one end of the blackboard and went to the other end of the blackboard. And the blackboard must have been about 12 feet long. And I kept wondering, what is he continuously writing? And I never understood the subject because there was no practitioner who came and told me what I would do with econometrics. So I think it's very critical in all our business schools to have a blend of theory and practitioners. And today, believe me, I mean, I've spoken to at many institutes, I've spoken to many senior leaders in terms of the education field. The corporate world has an amazing knowledge bank of experience. And there will be, I would be surprised if there will be any corporate leader who will say that I don't want to go and teach. Because everybody is beginning to realize that there is time for me to give back. So whichever country you're going to be talking to, whichever country you are going to be speaking to for your program, remember that there are enough and more corporate leaders who will be willing to come and talk to you. And they may not even want any money to be paid, because one, they want to give back. Second, teaching helps you to learn and internalize of what is happening in the world today. Third, it keeps you in touch with a lot of very young and vibrant minds. And fourth, it helps you to continuously innovate and reinvent yourself. So I know it's a long-winded answer to your question, but it is very critical for every management school to have a blend of the theory which is being taught by professors and the actual implementation of all the theory which is being implemented by or which is being taught by professors, by practitioners. So that's my quick answer for you.
Okay, let me, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I have an important question for you. Mm-hmm. Okay. As important as theory is, some of these fundamentals that are being taught, the fundamentals of accounting, fundamentals of finance, supply chain, and so on and so forth, those are available as videos everywhere.
Correct.
Not one or two videos, hundreds of videos. In other words, there is a supply of this free knowledge from multiple sources. Now, given that, what value do you think practitioners can add? I'm sorry, theoreticians can add in addition to whatever is there in all these videos? And if they can add more value than what is in these videos, what should they do?
So, and I understand where you're coming from, but an MBA program, that has been my personal opinion, is not to learn exclusively a subject. An MBA program brings, or for that matter, any program brings a multidimensional approach to multiple students. So if I have to go and learn the theory of accounting, you're absolutely right. I can go to YouTube and I can go online, and there are enough and more courses available. But what does an on-campus or an inside an institute classroom do for us? Number one, it gives us the ability to sit with peers, and a lot of learning happens with peers. Number two, what it does is it gives you the network and the desire to belong to an institute. Number three, and I'm now 65 years old, in the last 5 years, suddenly my school friends, my college friends, and my MBA friends have all started to discover each other again, and we are on WhatsApp groups, and suddenly we're talking after 35, 40 years of working. So I think this network is a very powerful tool of any business school. So if you look at it from purely the perspective of learning, I think it is okay to be able to say that I can learn only from YouTube. But the competition that all human beings like some kind of competition. So how did I do my mathematics paper or my econometrics paper or my marketing paper in relation to another person in my class keeps me going with that additional adrenaline rush that I need in the middle of the night when I go to sit and submit a paper or work on a case study and submit that. Case studies are becoming more and more complex and complicated. A discussion group with 3 people, 4 people and I've done this when I was, talking of 42, 43 years ago. But even then, I used to sit down and work through 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, because everyone had a perspective on how someone would have to solve this problem. And then we would take the case study back to the class. Our professor would give us one perspective based on, the knowledge in terms of the theory part, and our practitioner who would be there would actually take us through what were the other possibilities that were there, as compared to the 5 or 6 or 7 answers the class had come up in each group. So I think YouTube is a very, very strong tool for us to learn. But YouTube cannot give the social aspect, the networking aspect, the competitive aspect, the camaraderie aspect of a business school class.
Oh, I agree. I agree with everything you said, except for the fact that you said you are 65. You don't look 65. So
I'm 65. I'm going on to 66 now.
Yes. Okay. So, the other thing that comes to my mind is this. The theoreticians who teach these theory classes may be able to contribute more.
Correct.
If they inculcate recent business news into their lecture programs.
Correct.
So what that will do is that will give them an edge to demonstrate that what is not there in the YouTube videos are available in the class. Then the students will build the confidence that, yes, I can go to the class because the professor is going to discuss. For example, today, Elon Musk just tweeted that he wants to buy Twitter.
Correct.
Now, before somebody reacts and then creates a class based on this, how the Twitter stock is reacting and how the competitors are reacting, and how the monopoly restriction councils are going to react, and so on and so forth. Before those things appear on some kind of a video, if professors can bring that to the classroom and then discuss it, that requires some kind of a proactive initiative from the professors, I guess. That's the way they can differentiate.
You're absolutely right. There is a real world element that needs to be brought into into the life of every student. And this becomes even more important for MBA students who are now getting into the corporate world, and very soon will start getting into leadership roles. Let's take an example. You took the example of Elon Musk and Twitter. Let's take the example of what's happening in Ukraine and Russia. Now, one part is the war, but there is a huge underlying thing that's going on in what would happen if China and Russia start to trade with one another in ruble and yuan. What would that do to the US dollar? The US dollar is the world's reserve currency. What would happen if the US dollar's reserve currency status starts to get threatened, right? What would happen if oil starts getting traded in not just one currency, but in 3 different currencies? Right now, these are all actually game-changing events that are likely to happen. And either an individual is motivated enough to go and check out on YouTube or different magazines and read articles, or the classroom that they are in should be able to at least start a healthy discussion on what are the possibilities. There are no right or wrong answers, because the world economy changes literally on the spin of a coin. One little strategic move or disastrous move like what Mr. Putin has done, or how some other world leader reacts, can actually change the entire world economy. So I think it is important for us to start bringing in an interpretation of real life events in the world into the classroom, and then integrate it with what could have been the impact from an economics perspective, from a marketing perspective, and so many other perspectives. So I think what you've said is a very important question that you asked, was that, how do we start talking about real life situations in the world? And what would be the impact on, to go back to your example of Elon Musk? On the one side, it is fantastic to be able to say that, Elon Musk may buy and privatize Twitter and do something different. And he's talking about democratizing this social media platform. But can a social media platform be democratized if it is owned by one individual? Right? Can personal biases come in? Right? So I think these are all a lot of things that we need to think about and talk about. That's what on what the possible implications are. Let's take another example, and the example that I gave you of what is happening in with the sanctions against Russia. Right? Whatever is happening between Russia and Ukraine is wrong. But look at it now from the rest of the world's perspective, when large internet companies have just blocked off a country from access, right? You and I are speaking on Zoom. You and I are saving this conversation on the cloud. I will send it to you on the cloud, right? What happens if tomorrow the American companies say we're going to sanction India, and Ram, whatever I have, my entire life is now on the cloud in one of the big American companies. So therefore, there are these, these would be seismic changes that may happen in the countries, which will actually result in countries beginning to, put up their borders, saying we want to be able to have all these major resources in our own country. So now these are all implications that we have to take into account, and no student can take life for granted and say there will be no change.
So this requires, I would say from your conversation, whatever you just told me now, this requires professors to become students first.
Correct.
The professors need to learn how they are going to deal with these issues. Correct. And how they are going to discuss these issues in the classrooms, for which the professors have to do a lot of reading themselves.
Correct. Not only that, Ram, I would go back add one more thing to you, which is that when I was growing up and doing my MBA, there were certain things that were taken as given when my professor told me something, right? Because of the pedestal that they were on. Today's Gen Z and all the people in the alphabet soup after the Gen Zs, they don't, hesitate in asking questions. And if a professor does not know enough in a social media democratized world where everyone has access to everything, they're going to be challenges. Because if supposing you're in my class and you start asking me why, how, who, what, and if I'm not able to answer you, you can imagine how your reaction would be to me as your professor.
Oh, true. I mean, that is why I request professors to check their ego out as they enter the classroom. Correct. Because the best way to tackle any situation for a professor is, if they don't know something, the best way to say, I don't know, let's pursue this together.
Correct.
And if you know the answer, please educate me. If that kind of a humility exists in professors,
correct,
that will come back to reward them.
Well said.
So the second factor in the trifecta of the factors we are talking about is what kind of methods one need to use in embodying education. Rather than doing whatever is being done for years together, I just want to propose something to you and get your views on that. Why not professors create videos, send it to students early on, so that the students watch those videos at their own convenience, come to the classroom exclusively to participate in discussions with each other and with the professors on what they learn, rather than the professor telling them everything related to the basics of the topic taught. Why not do that as a homework, not after the class, but before the class, come to the class solely for the purpose of discussing things? Absolutely
brilliant thought. And this takes me back many, many years. I used to have a very senior boss in the company that I used to work for, and he would, send out the detailed business plans for the company. And then when we would go for a board presentation, he would start by telling the board that instead of my taking you through the entire presentation, can I take it as read? Now, can you start asking me questions? And that was a paradigm change, because nobody at the top level would ever read. They would get their big folders, binders, they would come to the boardroom and then expect to be taken through it. And the standard words, the phrase in those days, will you walk me through your business plan? So when this business leader came and said, and I was, an assistant to him, he would walk into the boardroom and say, can I take this as read? And once, if you have read it all, now let's get into a discussion on what my challenges are and how you can help me. So if professors start to video record, and today there are enough and more tools available, not just to record, but to disseminate across multiple platforms. If they record a class session and then spend the class of 45 minutes or 1 hour or whatever time that is, in a healthy discussion, two things will happen. Number one, the time that is being taken to disseminate the knowledge in the class, which is basically a one-way dump of a lot of knowledge that is taking place, won't happen. But more importantly, if I'm one of those students who is used to being spoon-fed and making copious notes in the classroom, I will be forced to read and listen to what my professor has recorded for me, and then ask my questions, so that the discussion will be more in terms of what all of us have interpreted from the classroom, rather than listen to it and then the moment I step out, I'm now either going to forget what I've learned, or I'm going to wait for someone else's notes to say, can let's share what you have noted down. So you're absolutely right. I agree with you.
Yeah, of course, there has got to be a difference between a first standard class and an MBA class.
Completely.
You can't spoon feed in MBA classrooms.
Absolutely.
For that matter, any postgraduate classrooms.
Correct.
Now comes what, how we have just completed. Now let's talk about what needs to be taught. Okay. Mm-hmm. Here is this. I have attended several custom courses, okay, which are not offered in many institutions around the world. I was fortunate that the institution that I attended offered such courses. I've spoken to several executives, CEOs. What I have found was there is one particular topic that many want the schools to teach. That is, nowadays, corporations are flooded with cash. They are hoarding cash and shedding employees. So they have so much cash.
Correct.
Several people said business schools have to start teaching how to deploy capital effectively. Mm-hmm. Now, deploying large amounts of capital effectively comes only out of practice. There is no book that says, you can't go and buy a book that says, okay, how to deploy capital. Mm-hmm. So, in addition to such courses, what other custom courses would you prefer that the MBA students be taught? And if required, if they have to invite practitioners like you to teach those courses, then so be it. There is no point in saying we don't have staff, we don't have informed professors here to teach these courses. Rather than doing that, they could go and invite people like you to say, hey, this is a custom course. Remember that one course that I offer, CEO 2030, such similar courses. So do you have any course in mind that you want business schools to teach? That will help the industry.
Let me start with your last point, which is, business schools may say that we don't have access to people, not many people are available. I think that is a fallacy. Given today's network of, platforms that people can choose from, you can actually reach out to anyone in any corner of the world. And time zone permitting, I don't think there will be any human being who will say, Ram, I am not willing to come and take a 45-minute or a 1-hour class, irrespective of which part of the world I may be in, or wherever the students may be in. So I think that is a concept that needs to be completely disabused, that resources may not be available. There'll be, if a business school was to put on LinkedIn that I'm looking for professors for this subject to teach so-and-so matter, they will be flooded with hundreds of responses to say, I'm willing to offer my time gratis, because every time a corporate leader goes and teaches, we've already said, he or she always ends up getting a lot in return in terms of interaction with students, in terms of preparing for the class, networking, etc., etc. Having said that, you started by talking about companies having surplus funds and therefore business schools should start teaching that. That is one aspect. But I think what is very important for every business school student to start understanding is that there is a lot of knowledge that exists with practitioners, and they can teach you, if you want to become a startup, what are the things to do in your startup, and what are the things, how what goes into bootstrapping a company, right? Very important. Every company will not become a unicorn, right? But there will be many companies which will have opportunities to do many things. Students have to be taught that one of the primary reasons startups or entrepreneurship fails is because people give up, right? Why do you have to give up? People have to be taught that if you choose not to be an entrepreneur and you decide you want to work for one of the large companies, you need to be a professional entrepreneur within your company, because today every company is encouraging you to take the initiative. And whether it's a small little project or a large project, every company is doing multiple things which are very entrepreneurial in nature. Number 4, and this is something I have a book on also, on failure. Management schools don't teach people it's okay to fail. It doesn't matter. We do keep hearing all over the world that Silicon Valley, the region that you are sitting in, actually celebrates failure. But you're probably one of the few regions where if I go and say that I've failed 3 times, someone else will say, okay, you learned a lot. Most parts of the world will not give you the same kind of a reaction or a clap on your pat on your back to say that, okay, no worries, Ashutosh, you can now start all over again. So failure is another area that needs to be taught. When it comes to managing money, if you were to do a study, I would say 95% of startups who raise money burn it so quickly that they are not able to meet anything that they plan to do. And that results in serious challenges between them and their investors. So management of investors is a very critical aspect of any young startup or any young MBA student. So there are many such subjects that need to be brought into the curriculum of a business school.
Oh, that loops back to our primary question, which was who should teach? Because if someone who has never managed investors, if someone who has never launched companies,
correct,
if someone who has never failed. Oh, by the way, if you want to talk to your students about failure, please invite me. I'll be there. So,
Absolutely.
So I still remember somebody asked a question in my class once. How can somebody who works for government salary, who relies on government pension for retirement, teach me about entrepreneurship?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I didn't have any answer. I was stuck by that question. I was shocked that question was raised. Out of politeness, I didn't answer that question. So it comes back to the importance that practitioners bring to the classroom and the need to include more and more practitioners in all theory classes. This is one thing I know. Every time I talk to you, it is like sitting in your classroom.
No.
Well, you may be golfing in Tegusi Kalpa or somewhere. Instead, you chose to talk to me. I truly appreciate it.
No. It's a pleasure speaking to you now.
So thank you, Ashutosh. Always enjoyed talking to you. I fondly recollect our days together setting up that incubator in IIM.
Correct.
So hope to see you soon.
Look forward to that.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.